Hello, here we are this morning at the 420 Gaming League, and I'm here to discuss how to get the maximum performance out of your non-K Intel processors. So sometimes, like when you're gaming and things, the CPU can't get enough power on the boost, and the boost clocks drop, and that causes FPS drop, which can cause stuttering and performance loss. As you see here, this i8400 is defaultly running at the max boost most of the time on this Gigabyte board. I'm assuming because the Gigabyte board is trying to force it to already. But as you see on the min values, it doesn't stop it from going down to 2800, which is the default clock occasionally. So I'll show you, right now it's at 3800 most of the time. We're going to go over the CPU Z and click stress, and as you see, it was hovering 2400 for a second. Now it's going down a little. It's hovering at 2390, 24. It's pretty consistent still, but as you look at the cores, they're fluctuating. They're going from 31 to 37 to 35 to 38 to 32. They're not completely staying at 38 all the time, and it should be able to. Let's be honest, this is not like a huge, super powerful processor. So I'm going to stop the stress tests, and I'm going to go over the Intel Extreme Tuning utility. So this utility should be able to work on any Intel motherboard pretty much, and it just allows you to modify the power settings for the boost, so that the boost always has the maximum power needed. So when you're gaming, it doesn't keep on fluctuating, going up and down, up and down. So as you see, the default settings for this i8400 are the default power max is 65 watts. That's the TDP for the processor. And the turbo boost short power is 81 watts. That's what's giving you the max power during your games. Well, this processor is not going to overheat, so we should probably have it running on 81 watts all the time, no matter what, during gaming. So in order to get this to happen, we go over here and we up the short turbo boost power to doesn't even matter because we'll never get there. So I'll put this one at 120, and the turbo boost max power, we're gonna up this sucker to at least 85. I'll go to 90 because I know it's never gonna get there. Now here's another important one, the turbo boost time window. So it's saying here it's only going to boost for 8 seconds max, because it's assuming your computer can't stay cool, which it might not. You got to make sure you have enough cooling, or at least some fans in your computer. We're going to up this to frickin' 128 seconds, and we'll apply the settings. And it's saying that it's applied, I believe. And we'll go back to the CPU Z to see if it made any difference. I'm not sure if it will, but we'll see. So it did seem to make a difference. It's now staying the boost at 3800 no matter what. It's not dropping down. It's freaking pegged. So just by adjusting those settings, your computer will not have low FPS drops during gaming intensive times. And now, as you see on the CPU Z, it's not even fluctuating. It's staying at a steady 2420. It's always over 2400. So it's not giving you that much more performance, but it does help smooth out the lower frames. And I think that's important to do on the non-K Intel processors, just to keep the gameplay fluid. Just to show you, this computer doesn't really have extreme cooling. It has a cheap $10 Cool Moon CPU cooler, which I highly not recommend. But it seems to be able to keep the CPU cool, because this place doesn't get really hot where I have it at. And I have $4 or $5 fans keeping this sucker cool. As you see, the temperatures are staying pretty good. I know it's cool in here, but it's staying. It's not getting hot even with a garbage CPU cooler. I actually think this cooler is probably the same or lower performance than the Intel stock cooler, but I'm not positive. So yeah, it's still running 3800. I probably wouldn't need to do any more messing with this, to be honest with you, but we're gonna restart, and I'm going to show you, if your BIOS can support it, how to make sure your computer boots at boost clock and it's always running a boost clock no matter what. Even without multi-core enhancement, even these cheap, usually these cheap motherboards can still do something like this. So we're going into the BIOS, we're going into the Gigabyte BIOS, we're going to the advanced frequency settings, and here's it says auto. So we're going to go here and we're going to change that to 38, so that way it boots up at 3.8 gigahertz for all cores. And then we're also going to go to the advanced frequency core settings, and we're going to do something similar here. Instead of having auto for the cores above, we're going to have them always at 38 for anything above 2 cores. So this is going to make sure that the boost never goes down. You got to make sure, like I said, that your CPU cooling can handle it and you have enough power for your processor. Some of these larger, like i7 9700s, they can still draw quite a bit of power when you do this, because even though they're a non-K processor, you're putting the boost on the whole time. So just make sure that you got the adequate cooling for your computer if you modify these settings for your non-K processor. I believe that is all I need to set in here. The only other thing I would maybe recommend doing is go to the advanced voltage settings if you have it in your computer, and go to the CPU voltage control. Actually, this is not what I'm looking for. We'll go back, and I think it's actually the advanced power settings. That's it. And you want to go to the internal load line DC, and you don't really want to put on extreme per se, and performance is, I think, the default pretty much auto. So we're going to go to turbo, and that just makes sure that when it's boosting, the CPU is getting the correct voltage, it's not going too low. This will make sure that the games don't crash or anything like that. And for the load line calibration, I'll put as high, because it doesn't really matter too much, but the higher is better when you run your computer at increased clock speeds, or especially if you're running the boost 24/7. So we're gonna attempt to get out of the BIOS now. Save and exit. Yep, we're done here, and then we'll go into Windows one more time, and we'll see if it did any change. I don't think it's actually going to change. I think the Intel power settings are actually way more important than changing the Intel the motherboard settings, but I'm not positive. So you definitely want to change them both depending on what brand of motherboard your system is. And we're going to bring up the hardware monitor, and we're going to bring up CPU Z, and we're going to bring up the Intel. We're going to the controls just to make sure that it's kept the settings. It did keep the settings. It changes at boot up. It's good. And then we'll go to the monitoring. So here we're monitoring the settings for the Intel CPU. As you can see, we're still at 3800, and there's no dips now on this boot up. We haven't seen it go below at all. That's what we're going for. So like before, we saw a boot up that was going down to 32 or lower, and different settings. We're going to stress the CPU now. It actually appears by changing the CPU motherboard settings that we may be actually getting a lower score by having it get more voltage, which is kind of ironic. But it's what happens sometimes with these Intel processors. They don't really need that much voltage in the first place, so by upping the settings, it doesn't necessarily get you more performance per se. But we are staying at the the boost speed all the time. So that's what we're going for with that quick adjustment on the motherboard BIOS settings. As you see here, the CPU utilization's at 100%. The temperature is getting higher, but it's leveling off at 60 degrees even with this cheap CPU cooler. And that's it. We're wrapping it up. This computer is stable. It is now running the Intel i8400 at 6-core boost the whole time. It hasn't gone down once in the boost. Temperature stable at 140 degrees max. And that's that. Have a great day. This is the 420 Gaming Link showing you how to get your Intel i non-K processor to get performance. And also you can use this on your non-K processor too. I mean on your actual K processor. But you have to be careful on your K processor if you have it overclocked. If you have the TDP settings and the voltage settings set really high and the wattage settings, you definitely can get crashes and things. That's because if you're pulling too much power from the VRM, the computer won't be stable. So this is definitely safe for non-K processors, and please know what you're doing if you're using it on a K processor. Have a good day.